Hello and welcome back to Florida Foodie. I'm your host, Candace Campos, along with our producer, Thomas Mates.
Hello.
And listen, whether you buy it on the go or you make it at home, a lot goes into your morning cup of coffee, more than you actually can think. And it can really have a big global impact. Some things you don't think about when you're just trying to get into work, but it's true. Today we are joined by Ben Hoyer from Orlando-based coffee chain Downtown Credo to show us more about the big picture when it comes to coffee. Ben, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just break down what is Downtown Credo and what is it all about?
Great. Downtown Credo has been like 9-10 years of my life, so when someone says what is Downtown Credo, immediately I have like 100 memories and like several evolutions. But the best way to describe Downtown Credo right now is it's 3 very local coffee shops with a local roaster with a particular heart. So Downtown Credo is sourcing all of our coffee from direct trade relationships, roasting it right here, and then letting you name your price for every cup, so that your morning cup of coffee can be a step towards becoming a person of positive impact in the world.
Okay, so when you say name your coffee, you really mean name your coffee?
Yeah. So
price it.
Yeah. So you get to decide. For me, buying a cup of coffee is a big deal. There's no such thing as local coffee for us here in Orlando. So every cup is affecting dozens of people's lives. And so I don't want to presume to sell you something like that. I want to let you join me in making a positive impact with that cup of coffee.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just thinking about like the footprint that it makes. I mean, that you can apply that to more than just coffee, even, right? All your food.
Of course. Yeah. So that was a big sticking point for me actually like 9 years ago when we started. Was like I had finished college, I had moved to Orlando, I knew I was going to be here long term, and I wanted to build a life that I would like. And I decided that my quality of life is more tied to who I'm becoming than what I have. And I thought if I become a person of meaning, impact, and community, then no matter how much stuff I accumulate over the course of my life, I'll like it better. And so I started thinking about how am I a person of meaning, impact, and community, and I realized supply chains are maybe my biggest impact on the world. Where my clothes come from, where my food comes from, where my car comes from, and I immediately got overwhelmed.
It sounds overwhelming.
Yeah, it is overwhelming, right? Like I can't pay attention where my tomatoes are coming from, where the metals in my phone are coming from, but like a friendship fell into my lap to build a direct trade relationship with coffee growers in Guatemala. And so I flew with him down to Guatemala. We flew into Guatemala City and then 45 minutes up into the mountains into this dirt runway, drove an hour outside of the village to these little coffee growers. And that's where he was buying his coffee from. And I said, man, I would love it if I was a person who paid this much attention to my morning cup of coffee. That's how it started for me. That's why when you say, what's Downtown Credo?
Yeah, you're like well.
6 memories start coming to mind.
You're like, well, sit down and just listen. So where do you get the coffee from? So do you get it from Guatemala? Like what other places do you get it from?
That's great. Yeah, we have 3 direct origin relationships that we work with right now. One is that group of growers in Guatemala. It's been our longest. 2010 is when I made my first trip down there. And we've been buying directly from them ever since. And then we built a relationship with a friend in Miami. His name's Emil, and his family has a connection to some small cooperatives in Honduras, and we buy directly from them. And then last year I built a relationship with a group of growers in Chiapas, which is right on the border between Mexico and Guatemala, and we started buying directly from them as well. The beauty of buying direct is it provides small-scale growers with reliable and consistent sales where their sale price isn't fluctuating with the market because I make a personal commitment to them that I'll spend this much on your coffee. You can predict it, and I'll tell you how much at the beginning of the year I'm going to buy. So it really changes their relationship to the market.
So in making these direct connections, and you're giving the money right to them, have you been able to see like their quality of lives change over time from like right when you first met them to now they have this consistent income?
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting to see what happens. And there's probably more than we need to go into, but the short version is, yes, I have seen improvements. So the growers in Guatemala, 2 examples come to mind. One, 2 to 3 years ago, mold really affected the quality and output of coffee plants in Guatemala. It was called rust. And so a lot of their prices went way down because the quality of their coffee went way down. Because I was committed to them, I paid the same price for the coffee. I had built my business model off it. I knew I could support it. I might have been able to force them to sell it to me for less, but I decided not to do that. And that gave them consistent income in a really dark year for them in Guatemala that was really difficult. The other story that comes to mind is that they used to outsource part of the production of the coffee in order to remain high quality, but with our consistently paying the high prices that we are, they were able to build their own production facility and move a lot of their milling and their washing of the coffee into their own means rather than having to outsource that. So they're controlling more of the supply chain.
And for high prices, you're not talking high prices just like what we think high prices are, because money does fluctuate a lot between here in America and here and over there in Guatemala as well. So I mean, that's probably why the whole name your price of the coffee is so important to you.
Yeah, the reason I like people naming their price is so that it's really an interesting exchange to watch people that come in for the first time and they say, they order café con leche is one of folks' favorite drinks.
Love me some café con leche.
We take a double shot of espresso and some brown sugar and caramelize that brown sugar with the espresso and then pour steamed milk over top of it. If you get it in a cortadito, we do it with steamed half and half, and it's really delicious. Ooh. Yeah, that's our top selling drink, right? So someone comes in and orders a café con leche for them and their friend. Coffee's always better with a friend, right? Of course. And then they say, how much do I owe you? Or how much does it cost? And the barista says, well, how much would you like to pay? Immediately there's it stops the conversation in the tracks and people don't know what to do, right? And it's that moment right there where they're stopped in the tracks. That's why I have people name their price, because I feel like we get on such a conveyor belt of experiences that we don't think about where that coffee came from. And if I can disrupt you for just a minute, even if you pay the same that you would at any other coffee shop, right? Even if you pay the same amount, the point is not to change the amount that you pay, it's to change the experience so that you own your place in the supply chain and you get to say, oh, somebody had to pick this coffee off of a mountain in Guatemala in order for me to enjoy it here with my friend this afternoon. And I want to be a part of that, not just what can I get, but who can I become in the process of drinking coffee.
Wow. I mean, that's a packed thought sometimes, in the morning when you're like, I just want a cup of coffee. But it really does. It stops your day and it gives you that ability to say, you know what, today I can and I want to pay maybe more because today I'm a little more appreciative than other days.
Yeah, sure, right.
You know what I mean? So do you sometimes see frequent customers come in and maybe change their pricing?
Yeah,
depending on the day?
Yeah, so I think that folks tend to get in a rhythm of our regular customers. So we have regular customers at all of our shops. And we do one thing where people can buy a monthly card. So we have lots of our regulars that will just make an investment once a month. So they'll pay, and they'll pay they'll buy an unlimited espresso card for the month, and then they just show that every time they come so that they can avoid making the decision every time, right?
You're looking into their eyes going, name you a price.
I tell people, they ask, how does it work with people naming their price? Does it work? But I've never managed a coffee shop any other way, so I don't have anything to compare it to. And I came into the coffee shop philosophically, right? Like, I didn't come in as a business guy going, how could I start a coffee shop that makes money? I came in philosophically going, how could I challenge people to think about meaning, impact, and community? And I had met these coffee growers in Guatemala, and so I just asked my friend, how much does it cost for me to buy this coffee from you? He gave me a price, and I said, okay, I've got to sell it for more than that.
Right.
And that's what I've done the whole time. So I don't really know how they do relative to other shops. Recently, I started analyzing what people pay their average transaction and asked a friend of mine that manages another well-known coffee shop. And
remain nameless.
And he said it's about average, that our ticket price is about average of what people tend to pay, what they would pay somewhere else, which I think is great.
Have you ever had a really shocking amount, like someone just get the concept in their head and they're like, all right, well, I'm going to drop $100 on this cup of coffee.
Yeah, so I haven't, the first 3 years I was behind the counter every day making drinks, and that's when I saw more. I saw one dude paid $100 for a latte and a cupcake.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like,
it was good.
Yeah, he made a good impact that day.
Yeah. I bet.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're not just talking. This is not just a charity that you're getting, coffee that's been sitting in a pot. I mean, you're talking about you really put a lot of craft and love and passion into your cup of coffee. It's not just the meaning and the motto behind it. It's also about the coffee. So give us kind of an idea of one of your favorite type of coffees to serve.
Yeah.
Or even drink.
Yeah, so in the morning I usually will drink either a batch brew or an Americano. I just like black coffee. In the afternoon, I've been on iced lattes, but regular milk is really heavy in the afternoon, so I've been using oat milk. We have oat milk in the shops. And then we switched from syrups to extracts several years ago so that they're not as weighty and heavy and sugary. Yeah. So I like a lavender extract with a little bit of honey. So it's like an iced oat milk lavender latte with a little bit of honey in it. It's one of my favorite drinks right now. I had one of those on my way here actually this afternoon.
That also sounds like the joke latte someone would order in a sitcom. But it does sound really good.
It's fantastic.
Lavender extract and,
So you've kind of been like alluding to this the whole time, but like there's a lot of like buzzwords that kind of get thrown around with coffee, like single origin and fair trade and things like that. And can you just kind of like break those down for people and why they're important when you're selecting your cup of coffee?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I mean, coffee is one of those things like wine or scotch that you could just keep going down the road forever on. It's like a rabbit hole of discovery, right? Yeah. And similar to like wine or scotch, your palate gets initiated the more of it you have, right? So a casual drinker of coffee may not notice the complexities in the flavor changes, right? So I think that our artisan or locally roasted, small batch roasted coffee, different from like large chain or high production coffee, you can taste the difference. But it may take an initiated palate to recognize the difference, right? For me, one helpful distinction, at least in the space I'm in, is this fair trade versus direct trade, right? And the difference there is just fair trade is a certification that a cooperative would need to get. And that to qualify for that certification is like qualifying for an organic trade certification or something where there are minimum standards about what you pay, who's allowed to harvest, and how the business of the production goes. And fair trade is a certification that happens across industries, not just in food or in coffee, right? What we find in coffee is that fair trade sets a floor on the price. Okay, once you qualify, you go through the trouble to get certified as fair trade, and nobody can pay you less than a certain amount for that cup, for those beans, right? As a grower. Yeah. It's a false market, right? You may have coffee that on the regular market wouldn't demand that high of a price, but because you qualify as fair trade, legally they can't, right?
Gotcha.
The problem is people have to lay out money to get that certification, and they're not guaranteed a certain amount of sales at the fair trade price.
Gotcha.
So they may try and sell it as fair trade, but nobody wants to buy it from them as fair trade. So then they've got to sell it as a regular price, not as fair trade. There's no guaranteed sale. So they lay out money and don't necessarily recoup it, right? Direct trade is where I build a relationship with you, specifically as a grower, and I'm going to work hard to get the money as directly as I can to you. So a friend of mine works in Mexico and was buying coffee in country from Mexico for his restaurant chain. And he realized to get coffee from coffee growers to his restaurants, he had 9 people in the supply chain in between him, each of them marking up the coffee and taking a little cut, right? The growers getting the least of the money.
Right, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So this direct trade goes around those middle people in the supply chain and gets as much money into the hands of the coffee growers as possible. That's really great. Then the next step for Credo, what we do is instead of going direct to large-scale farms, we go direct to super small scale growers. Like when I made that trip to Guatemala, we brought clean water filters with us because they didn't have clean drinking water. They had dirt floor homes, right? And so you have to work really hard to figure out how to get their coffee out of the country. You need advocates and supporters, right? And that's what we do. We have advocates that help us get that coffee out of the country and over to us.
Yeah.
But that's really hard to do. The highest level you can look for usually is just direct trade coffee, because it's getting as much money into the hands of the growers as possible.
I mean, how long does that process take to find that local grower and create that that relationship, and also figure out how you're going to get it from point A to point B?
Listen, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's very serendipitous. I'll try and make the story brief about how I made this new connection. But one of my projects, once I had started downtown Credo and realized that you could generate revenue and address and make a positive impact in the world, I started a nonprofit called Rally that tries to help people do that, start social enterprises. In order to do that, I partnered with Rollins, right? In that work with Rollins, I met a professor at Crummer that was writing a book on a social enterprise in Mexico. The social enterprise was part of a large company, the one that I just mentioned in Mexico, that was sourcing their coffee directly from coffee growers. And she brought some back. She didn't drink any coffee, so she brought it for me. She only drinks tea. And it tasted wonderful. She actually brought 2 origins. One of them didn't taste very good. The other one I really liked. And I said, I love this coffee. And she got all excited. She connected me in email to the guy in Mexico. And he said, I looked at your website. He's like, if you can get yourself to Mexico City, I'll take care of all your expenses on the ground and take you to meet these coffee growers in Chiapas.
Wow.
He's like, I'm going in 3 weeks. I said,
Sign me up.
okay, I'll go.
Yeah, right.
So we bought a plane ticket, and I went, and I realized as I was flying to Mexico City that I don't speak any Spanish. And I'm flying into Mexico City, and I have an address to Uber to at night that I'm going to show the Uber driver, and hopefully everything works out.
Right.
I show the Uber driver. He looks twice at me at the address, says, okay. I get in the car, and I pull up to an Intercontinental Hotel. It's one of the nicest one of the nicest hotels in Mexico City, right? And then fly with the guy that owns the company, his private jet, to the border between Mexico and Guatemala.
You're like, am I in a movie? Am I in a movie?
Amazing,
Yeah.
right? Then we get in
nerve-wracking too. Like you're just almost waiting for the other shoe to drop.
It was crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like these guys, yeah. So it's a very successful company that owns 200 restaurants in Mexico that decided they wanted to try and source their products ethically. And I found out later I was on the plane with the 2 guys that owned the company because they were going to see the new village that they were buying coffee from. Okay, so I stay in their Intercontinental Hotel, and then in the morning fly on their private jet to the border between Guatemala and Mexico.
Really roughing it.
Yeah. Then I get in the back of a van and drive up the side of a volcanic mountain, Cafe Tacana, right? To the border between Guatemala and Mexico, where they're smuggling people across the border. I mean, it's one of the craziest spaces I've been. Then we drive up further into this village with indigenous people. They don't have deeds for the land. They just have always lived there, and that's their land. The coffee grows naturally on the side of the mountain, and they just have harvested it because they need to find a way to make money, and there's coffee growing here, so they're selling it. This restaurant group has determined that they want to buy directly from this village and several villages like it. So they assure them they'll buy all the coffee they can harvest and pay above market value because they're cutting out these 9 men they now can.
Yeah.
And when they come, Heifer International comes, Rainforest Alliance comes, and they begin to help them increase the production. They find out that the women there can also make a really great mole sauce. So they start buying mole sauce from these women for the restaurants that are near them, right? I mean, it's an amazing project.
Yeah.
And I leave completely inspired, right? And I come back, I write an email, thank you, Gustavo, for the trip. It was amazing. If you ever get the coffee into the States, I'd love to sell it here. He says, how much can you buy?
Wow.
And I said, well, let's start with a pallet of coffee. He said, great, I'll have it to your door at this price. Here's your price. I said, great, I can sell it for more than that. And now we've developed this partnership. They just came here last week because the producers at the cooperative wanted to see where their coffee ended up. And so it was their 3rd visit ever into the United States. This guy who grew up as a son of a coffee farmer in Mexico, first time in Florida ever, drove around to see the 3 coffee shops where his coffee ended up, right?
Oh my
It's an amazing
God.
story, and it changes your experience of coffee to know that you're involved in something that is benefiting life, not just giving you a nice afternoon latte.
And how many people are involved within just the coffee growers? I mean, let's say, for instance, that last example.
So Jose runs the cooperative. He's the guy that came here. Mm-hmm. He works with 30 families that grow the coffee, that produce the one pallet, so 1,500 pounds at a time. We went through it in about 2 months. We put it on espresso in all of our coffee shops, and so now I'm going to start selling it more. So I'll get 2 pallets the next time, and then hopefully 3 pallets the time after that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. So I mean, even though you're only working with these small growers, there's no short supply of the coffee for you.
Right. Like,
are you guys having to keep up even?
You mean, are we running out of their production?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a little bit interesting because remember, coffee is harvested once a year, right?
Once a year?
Yeah, once a year. In a couple of regions, they can have 2 harvests a year, but usually it's like they just start now. It's November. They're just starting, and they'll finish late January, early February.
So it is like wine, where you have kind of that season where you're going to harvest the grapes.
Yep.
Right.
And then you sell it as soon as you can, right? And then because you have to keep it stable. Once it's processed, it can be stable if you take care of it. But if you don't take care of it, it'll go bad and then it's ruined. And then you sell it and then it's done, right? So I have had situations where, like with the Guatemalan, we've been working with them for 9 years, where I tell them in like January, February, how much of their coffee I think I'm going to want over the course of the year, right? And then they sell the rest of it, right? And so if I guess wrong, I've got to find somebody else to buy coffee from. If I got busier than I thought at the beginning of the year. So one of the challenges of doing coffee direct trade, if I were just buying from a broker, he imports all like containers and containers of coffee, and I can borrow it as I want, right? But if I'm earmarking it from specific growers, I've got to guess at the beginning of the year. The plus of this one in Chiapas, the story that I told you, is that I have that large restaurant group who buys a warehouse full of it, and they'll sell me theirs if I run low and guess wrong with Jose, right?
All right, and if you can describe what type of coffee this is, so someone who's like, okay, so this would taste, is it smoky? Is it? I mean, how would you describe the coffee?
Yeah, so. I think tasting is subjective, like I said, your palate, but you can notice specifics. And one of the things I like about this Mexican is that we can roast a little bit darker, which is why we feature it on our espresso machine. So I feel like it has a more earthy, kind of chocolatey, spicier notes. It has a little bit of sweetness, and it's not devoid of like a fruit flavor, but like our Guatemalan, which was on the espresso before, is a more like grapefruit forward coffee. This is much more earthy coffee.
That's amazing. So I was looking at your website, and you have some interesting quotes here.
Okay.
And one says, "We're learning that if you pursue a life of meaning, impact, and community, and start with steps so small that they may even seem silly, you may not know where you'll end up, but it will certainly be a good road."
Yeah.
That is kind of a mouthful when you think about the impact that you're not only having on a family, but I mean on a whole community in some places.
Right.
I mean, what is that meaning for you, that you want people just to make that decision on their coffee, but continue those decisions throughout their day?
Yeah, totally. So like that statement about steps so small they seem silly occurred to me. I think it works with coffee because if your morning cup of coffee, if you're naming your price for a coffee, if you come in, it might seem like, oh, this is a gimmick. It feels silly, right? But if you really think about it and own the potential of, oh, right, like let me join with the other Credo folks and have a positive impact in Chiapas. Rather than just buying any coffee, I know that I'm doing something. If you own it, it might inspire you to other steps of impact. Where this really occurred to me is when I decided I wanted to be a person of impact in my city, and I went to nonprofits and said, what are you not doing that you'd like to be doing? And the project that presented itself was picking up trash along Paramore Avenue downtown. And it was not a job I wanted to be doing. I remember one morning, it was when there was a fire station right there on Paramore Avenue. Fire Station 2 used to be down there. And the firefighters came out and they asked me, it was a Saturday morning. They were like, why are you doing this? Like in the afternoon, there's going to be trash here again, you know? And I tried to explain to them that it's not about what I'm accomplishing. It's about who I'm becoming. I don't want to solve the problem of trash. I want to be a person who doesn't walk by trash anymore, right? But what I didn't see coming, like that was the intention. What I didn't see coming is the friendships I made. And how I began to realize what it means I grew up in Lake Mary, what it means to be white middle class in the suburbs versus what it means to be black, poor, and from the city. And as I made friendships with people that grew up in different life experiences than me, all of a sudden my whole approach and outlook on life began to change. And if I never would have taken that step that seemed silly of picking up trash on Paramore Avenue on Saturday morning, I wouldn't have ended up there, right? And so the thing for me is a life of meaning, impact, and community. No matter who you are or what you have, you'll like better. But the trick is not to try and become a person of meaning, impact, and community on a large scale first. Start with your small decisions. Where are you getting your cup of coffee? How are you spending your Saturday mornings? What are the small decisions? How are those about meaning, impact, and community? And you can build from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's where that quote comes from.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, you're a father of 3, so your hands are quite full. I mean, how have you taught your kids through this whole process? Because you're also kind of you're an entrepreneur. You're creating your own business, a successful business in more ways than one. I mean, do they think Dad is just crazy?
They, at times. So we have done some different things on buildings, and we have, one of my favorite stories is in 2nd grade, my son, he's my oldest, he's in 6th grade now, but he came home one day in 2nd grade, and he said, hey, Dad, my friend Elizabeth and I, we're going to start a bookstore. I said, oh, that's cool. He's like, yeah, we got all these books. Elizabeth has a lot of books that girls like, so we're going to start with girls' books because we figure we could sell those. And I said, that's great. You've defined a niche market. Really smart. He's like, so, Dad, I'm going to need you to get a building. I said, a building? Yeah, you can get me a building, can't you? I need a building so I can, he's in 2nd grade, so I can start a bookstore. You know? And I like, just with respect to kids, bringing them along on the evolution and at the steps, bringing them to projects, taking him to classes at Rollins where I'm speaking on the value of social entrepreneurship, and not dumbing it down for them. And so I'm excited to see who they become after watching these stories, for sure.
Yeah, it's inspirational for sure.
Yeah.
So you have 3 locations right now.
Yeah.
How hard was it to scale, given that you have this direct relationship and you have to guess how much coffee you need? You know, how long into it was before you had the second business? And then what were the challenges with going about it this, less typical way?
Yeah, lots. I mean, lots of challenges. I had the benefit, of course, of being naive, right? Just naive enough, to not know.
No one told you couldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, and I didn't, because of the way I started, I didn't go into debt at all. I didn't know enough to know that you could go into debt to start stuff, right? And so, when Downtown Credo started as a 501c3 nonprofit, once we started opening other coffee shops, we moved into what's called a benefit corporation, which is a for-profit structure that exists for the benefit of the public, not the profit of the shareholders, right? It's a really cool thing that social enterprises are doing to institutionalize their social good, right? But when we started, we were a 501c3, so I just got donors to get me my initial equipment, cover my first lease. And then what happened is we had strategic partners. Downtown Credo came into the coffee shop market in Orlando at just the right time, when local coffee shops were starting to change out of the 90s local coffee shops, right? So we opened in 2009. Around the country, like a third wave of coffee shop, which might be very clean lines, modern furniture, artisanal coffee. Before that, coffee shops had been kind of dirty couches and cigarettes, right?
Yeah.
I joke, people from the 90s will remember a movie called So I Married an Axe Murderer. And I call it, So I Married an Axe Murderer coffee shops. Downtown Credo came in just after that wave, right at the right time. We were the first ones in Orlando.
I'm thinking like the Friends sitcom coffee shop,
exactly.
big couches.
There
and
actually
things
is
like
a coffee shop just like that in over in Audubon Park.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Downtown Credo came in at just the right time when people were looking for something else in coffee shops. And so we had people approach us about starting coffee shops. Once we had established ourselves in College Park, people approach us about, could you start one here? Could you start one here? And I had the benefit of having built friends and alliances around this mission. Right. And so we could just build strategic partners. So Advent Health brought us to build a coffee shop there. And there was a very strategic partnership. And then downtown, we put one in the Church Street Exchange building and found partnerships with Craig Usler and Brooke and the Creative Village. And then we found one in an apartment building where they brought us in. And so because Downtown Credo stands for meaning, impact, and community, we got really strategic partners, which made it possible. So we had really favorable leases. We got build-out support. So Downtown Credo's growth has been because we built strong alliances and friendships with people that believe in the mission that we're working on.
Well, and positivity builds more positivity.
For sure.
You know what I mean? And I think that just kind of sums up what Credo is all about, Downtown Credo is all about.
For sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us.
Lovely.
I learned so much. I am going to think so much more about the cup of coffee that I order. That's awesome. And if anybody wants to find you, what's your address? What's the best way of following you guys along the journey?
Yeah, so our Instagram is the most active, and that's just at Downtown Credo. Okay. Or you can contact us on our website, downtowncredo.com, and that generates an email that'll find its way to me. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Florida Foodie. We'd also like to thank our guest, Ben Hoyer from Downtown Credo. You can follow Downtown Credo on Facebook and Instagram, and you can also learn more on their website, downtowncredo.com. Our host is Candace Campos. Please take the time to follow her online as well. You can find her on Twitter, just search @CandaceNews6, and on Facebook, search Candace Campos News 6. We'd also like to thank our technical producers, Derek Mosier and Ryan Hawley. I'm the show's producer, Thomas Mates. Please take the time to rate and review us wherever you download your podcasts. And you can find videos of all of our podcasts on clickorlando.com/podcasts.